Chapter 5 lecture. Andrew Wakefield and colleagues published an article implicating vaccinations in the occurrence of autism. The research has since been debunked, yet many parents still refuse to vaccinate their children, at great risk to the child and to the community in general. This story illustrates the stickiness of misinformation. Rejecting information requires cognitive effort and will only occur if the topic is important to you or you're not already experiencing cognitive load. The rise of cognitive psychology in the 1970s and the development of attribution theory in the 60s and 70s led to a scientific study of thinking. Social cognition is a movement in social psychology that began in the 70s and focused on thoughts about people and about social relationships. Thinking about people is a special case of thinking about something. More of our thoughts are about people than any other subject, and in particular, for influencing people. Recent research suggests that much thinking is for arguing in the sense of trying to convince others. This is relevant to the theme of people first, the long road to social acceptance, and inner processes serving interpersonal functions. Humans have greater capacity for higher order thinking than other animals, but humans are cognitive misers. A cognitive miser is a term used to describe people's reluctance to do much extra thinking, due in part to limited capacity. Deliberate thinking requires more effort than automatic thinking. Automatic mind develops various shortcuts which give rough estimates or pretty good answers. Stroop test is a measure of effortful control over responses, requiring participants to identify the color of a word, which may name a different color. This illustrates automatic thinking and deliberate control. The Stroop effect occurs in the Stroop test, finding that people have difficulty overriding the automatic tendency to read the word rather than name the ink color. Automatic can be distinguished from the controlled by not its occurrence outside of awareness, by not being guided by intention, by not being subject to deliberate control. Here's an example of the Stroop test. It also is by not involving effort and by not being slow and cumbersome, but fast and efficient. Automatic structures rely on knowledge structures. Knowledge structures are organized by packets of information that are stored in memory. Schemas, knowledge structures that represent substantial information about a concept, its attributes, and its relationships to other concepts. Schemas simplify a complex world by helping us form expectancies. When what we expect from our schema is violated, deliberate thinking results. Scripts are the knowledge structures that define situations and guide behavior, include information about motives, intentions, goals, and situations, and the causal sequence of events. Scripts are learned. It influences people, how they perceive, interpret, judge, and respond to events in their lives. If encountered frequently enough, extremely complex knowledge structures can become automatic. Priming refers to planting or activating an idea in someone's mind so that related ideas are more acceptable. When one concept is activated, a related concept is activated as well. So if you say cradle, what is activated is you automatically think of baby. There's also an example of a study where participants were primed and later judged a man described in a paragraph differently. Priming can trigger automatic responses. Framing refers to how information is presented to others. Health-related information has been studied using two possible frames. A gain-framed appeal focuses on how doing something will make you more healthy. A loss-framed appeal focuses on how a health behavior will result in loss of health. Gain-framed appeals tend to be more effective at promoting prevention behaviors, but loss-framed appeals tend to be more effective at targeting behaviors that detect diseases people may already have without knowing it. There are two processes for keeping thoughts out of mind. Keeping watch for reminders of the unwanted thought, which would be an automatic response or process. Directing attention away from the unpleasant thought would be a deliberate process. If the controlled process wanes, the automatic process may flood the mind with unwanted thoughts. Tolstoy's brother's challenge to Tolstoy to not think of white bears was an example of thought suppression. Strategies for making tough choices. Conventional strategy is to make a list of pros and cons and analyze systematically. Others argue to try to absorb all the information and let the answer pop out of you. The more intuitive strategy has gained scientific credence in recent years. Allowing the unconscious mind time to work on a problem has produced more optimal decisions in some experiments, although this has not been consistently replicated. Unconscious does not seem very good at logical reasoning, particularly those things that result in changes in meaning when you combine terms. Both forms of reasoning are helpful. So, talking about dieting, dieters react differently to eating when full than non-dieters. In one study, non-dieters ate less ice cream after they had one or two milkshakes, while dieters actually ate more for after having milkshakes. Counter-regulation is the what the heck effect that occurs when people indulge in a behavior they're trying to regulate after an initial regulation failure. Dieters in the study seem to have engaged in counter-regulation. This seems to happen regardless of the actual calorie content of the food. If a dieter perceived his or her diet as being broken, he or she reacted by eating more fattening foods. Attributions are the causal explanations people give for their own and others' behavior. In a study of attributions, there was a radical step away from behaviorism for social psychologists. Heider explained things as due to either internal factors or external factors. Weiner, internal versus external, and stable versus stable. With this theory, there are four main types of attributions. Internal stable combination involves ability. Internal unstable combination involves effort. External stable combination involves task difficulty. External unstable combination involves luck. Self-serving bias is the tendency to take credit for success but deny blame for failure, or internal attributions for success, external attributions for failure. People prefer to attribute success to ability and failure to task difficulty or luck. This self-serving bias makes people feel good and is important for self-presentation. It occurs more when explaining behaviors to others than to self. Actor-observer bias is the tendency for actors to make external attributions and observers to make internal attributions. Fundamental attribution error is the tendency for observers to attribute other people's behavior to internal or dispositional causes and to downplay situational causes. The fundamental attribution error is more common in individualistic than collectivistic cultures. Bertram Moll has recently combined information from many studies to suggest there is no consistent tendency for observers to favor dispositional explanations. Actors do tend to state more reasons for their behaviors than observers do to explain observed behavior. Actors are more likely to incite beliefs as a driver of their own behavior, while observers point to the actor's desires. Other differences between actors and observers: people judge others by their actions, but themselves by their good intentions. People can see conformity in others, but not themselves because they rely on their own introspection. Moll proposes an alternate basic distinction people make in explaining actions. Intentional action, explained with reasons. Unintentional action, explained with causes. Heuristics are mental shortcuts that provide quick estimates about the likelihood of uncertain events, which there's some examples there. Representative heuristic is the tendency to judge the frequency or likelihood of an event by the extent to which it resembles the typical case. An example is coin tosses. One sequence looks random, the other does not. We judge the one that looks random to be more likely when they are actually equally likely. Availability heuristic let's stay on heuristics here. Is the tendency to judge the frequency or likelihood of an event by the ease with which relevant instances come to mind. It's influenced by salience and attention paid to the event. Death by plane crash is an example. So death by plane crash versus death because of tobacco use. Helps explain why individuals sometimes believe in ESP. They remember a dream that came true, but do not remember many that did not. Simulation heuristic is the tendency to judge the frequency or likelihood of an event by the ease with which you can imagine or mentally simulate it. Mr. Crane and Mr. T's arriving at an airport is an example. Mr. T's having missed his delayed flight by 5 minutes, Mr. Crane missing his flight by a half hour. Silver medalists at the Olympics tend to be more unhappy with their medal than bronze medalists for the same reason. Anchoring or adjustment heuristic is the tendency to judge the frequency or likelihood of an event by using a starting point and then making adjustments up and down. A study where participants were given a random number to begin with and ended up with different estimates depending on whether their number was high or low is another example. Is thinking full of errors and biases or effective and well tailored to its purpose? The standard view is people think in order to find the truth. Thinking suffers from mistakes and shortcomings stemming from laziness and motivational biases. Alternate views, people think in order to influence and argue with others, not to search for the truth. Shortcuts and heuristics work quite well. A pilot using a heuristic quite effectively to safely land a plane without power would be a good example. Statistical information from a large number of people is one type of information. Case history information from a small number of people is another. Is one better? People generally use case history information more than statistical, even though the statistical would help them make better decisions. Many psychologists argue that statistical information is better, and usually it is, but often the heuristic of relying on case history information will work quite well and far more efficiently than a deliberate mode of processing. Continuing on flawed or clever thinking, we'll give you some examples here. In counting the number of sex partners, men and women report different numbers. One agency found that American men reported on average 20 partners, women 6 partners. This is logically impossible. Men have different motivations for the reports. How do these translate into the disparity? Men and women might lie about the number of partners, but the finding is present when surveys are anonymous. The difference in findings may be due to men having sex with prostitutes or each other. This can account for some, but not all of the difference. Social cognitive research suggests that women make mental lists resulting in underestimates, while men make estimates resulting in overestimates. Men also tend to be broader for their definitions, allowing for the larger numbers they tend to prefer. Confirmation bias is the tendency to notice and search for information that confirms your beliefs and to ignore information that disconfirms it. Astrology and paranormal beliefs like telepathy can be explained by confirmation bias. Illusory correlation is the tendency to overestimate the link between variables that are related only slightly or maybe not even at all, particularly likely when two rare events occur together. When this occurs after just one exposure, it's called the one-shot illusory correlation. This is an illusory correlation that occurs after exposure to only one unusual behavior, but performed by only one member of an unfamiliar group. So, if you decided that going out in the rain without a jacket causes colds, that would be an illusory correlation. Maybe there's a relationship between the two. There may not be, but you're just automatically basing one thing on the other. Base rate fallacy is the tendency to ignore or underuse base rate information and instead focus on the distinctive features of the case in question. The gambler's fallacy and the hot hand. Hot hand players believe they have a hot hand and that luck in the past predicts luck in the future. The gambler's fallacy is the tendency to believe that a particular chance event is affected by previous events and that chance events will even out in the short run. False consensus effect is the tendency to overestimate the number of other people who share one's opinions, attitudes, values, and beliefs. False uniqueness effect, also known as the better than average effect or the Lake-Wobegon effect. This refers to the tendency to underestimate the number of other people who share one's most prized characteristics and abilities. People tend to overestimate their qualities or underestimate their qualities in whichever direction is best for their self-esteem. Perseverance of theories refers to the tendency of the mind to stick with a conclusion unless there is overwhelming evidence to change it. Losing the evidence for the conclusion is not sufficient to prompt this change. Statistical regression is also known as regression toward the mean. This refers to the statistical tendency for extreme scores or behavior to be followed by others that are less extreme and closer to average. Sometimes this happens with athletes who do particularly well one season. The next season, their extreme scores even out and they appear to be jinxed. Illusion of control refers to the false belief that one can influence certain events, especially random or chance ones. This may influence people to take more risks. Counterfactual thinking involves imagining alternatives to past or present events or circumstances. First instinct fallacy is the false belief that it's better not to change one's first answer on a test, even if one starts to think a different answer is correct. This may be due to better memory for correct answers that were changed to be wrong than for wrong answers that were changed to correct answers. Upward counterfactuals involve imagining alternatives that are better than actuality. Downward counterfactuals involve imagining alternatives that are worse than actuality. People make more upward than downward counterfactuals. although after a misfortune, people find some solace in downward counterfactuals. So they look at it like it could have been worse. Regret, often confused with counterfactual thinking, refers to a feeling rather than a thought. It involves feeling sorry for misfortunes or mistakes. What do our errors tell us? The errors we tend to make are predictable and reflect a style of thinking geared toward arguing one's case to influence others rather than to reason out truth. Heuristic processing usually does provide a correct answer, and some errors cancel each other out, and when they occur in random combination. Evolutionary psychologists believe that we make better decisions for the big things in life, those involving reproduction and survival. Reducing cognitive errors is taking a course in statistical reasoning that can help reduce some errors. Reducing errors and biases by getting people to use controlled processing rather than automatic processing is known as debiasing, and this can help. Metacognition involves reflecting on one's own thought processes. It can also help reduce errors. What makes us humans? Putting the cultural animal in perspective. The complex thinking processes unique to humans are evident in this chapter. Humans are unique in their use of symbolism, language, the rule-based, systematic, and precise thinking of the deliberate system. Use of heuristics, counterfactual thinking, and errors are evidence of this complexity.